Hi, this is Kyle Dawson, Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations for the Washington WildThings and the team broadcaster, and this is Dingo Talk.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week, Kyle Dawson, the Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations and broadcaster for the Washington WildThings of the Frontier League. Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Sure thing. I know it's been a little bit of a crazy haul to get on here with you, and I've listened to all the ones you've done with all the guys I know, and had a chance to do that on the way back from league meetings last week. So excited to be on with you.
I really appreciate that. It has been, the last two episodes, you and I think it was Kai. No, what was his name? Our last episode, because it's been 2 weeks now since we recorded, we had some technical difficulties, storms, and Mother Nature, and you traveling, me traveling, but we're here. So Kyle and I share alma mater in the sense Mustang, Plum Mustang graduate, 2013. How does a guy from Plumboro, Pennsylvania, all the way out there in the East Hills, tucked away, how does he find his way to Greene County, Pennsylvania, and Waynesburg?
Well, I don't remember who it was. I heard somebody one of the guys that I listened to, I had no idea that Waynesburg even existed, period. It's actually a pretty long story, so I don't know that, and I'll try to keep it like semi-concise. When I was in high school, I was intending on it, and throughout my formative years, I guess I was intending on and had my eyes kind of focused on, because I was playing baseball as I grew up. I was watching every sport I could. I had my eyes on sport management, and that probably was a thing until about middle of my sophomore year at Plum. Intended on taking all the TV courses that Plum had to offer, and trying to dabble my feet in a little bit there. And so that was part of it for sure. But I mean, I can go back to as just in terms of getting into broadcasting and getting into communications, back to when I was a peewee in the side of my house, throwing a ball against the wall and calling the game as I was doing it. I mean, there's videos of when I was 3 or 4 years old in the backyard, throwing the ball to myself, talking about Jack Wilson or Brian Giles or whoever it may be. And I would literally peg myself with the baseball to get myself out to have a game. But so I guess you can say it kind of fell into my lap a little bit in sophomore year of high school. I was doing stats for Ron Richards, who was another guest here on the show, in the basketball team for my 4 years at Plum. And we got to a game at Gateway my sophomore year in Barat, and the guys were coming in. I think it was one of my classmates, actually, that was coming in to record the game, and they didn't have a guy to do the announcing. And I'm like, Coach Richards, do you mind if because I had done this before. Eric Gillis was the JV coach. He was the kind of one that I reported to. I just asked them, I said, do you mind if I go up there? I've done the stats in the press box before from a different angle than the bench. Can I go do them up there and do the game? And they had no problem with it. So that transitions into junior year, where I was the lead voice for the football team, basketball team, and doing, I forget who the guys even were that were with me that year. But doing that. And then there's a basketball game. I think it was, I don't remember who we were playing at home, and it might have been Gateway. As you would know, our shows, our games were shown on the Plum Access channel on cable. So Lanny Fratteri, who's the professor down there at Waynesburg, obviously former 33-year voice of the Pirates, he came across the Gateway Plum game because he was getting ready to do a Plum Woodland Hills game for what was then the MSA Sports Network, which is now obviously Trib, which HSSN, which I'm with. And he was getting ready to do a game for them, and he came across our game, and he's listening, and he spots me out. So he calls Barat and I forget if it was our guidance counselor, Mr. Feckerty, or if it was one of the principals at Plum, and said, hey, I want to talk to the person who was doing the game I just came across the game. So he calls down to Barat, and I go into TV class that day, and Mr. Barat goes, do you know who Lanny Fratteri is? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, yes, I know who Lanny Fratteri is. I'm the biggest Pirate fan in the school. So that was actually really cool. So I had a chance to meet him. He did that Plum Woodland Hills game at Woodland Hills, talked to him during the JV game for probably 10, 15 minutes, and told me about the Waynesburg sports announcing camp which obviously has come up a couple times on your show, if not every time a Waynesburg guy has been on there. And I know that's going to offshoot into a question. But so I went to the camp, fell in love with the campus, fell in love with the program. And my mom always tells the story going back now every single time we went to another school that Waynesburg has this and Waynesburg has that, because that was the first outside of the sport management. I had visited DeSales University out, I think in central PA or more toward Philadelphia, somewhere out there for sport management. And their communications department wasn't even half the bread. Then we went to Slippery Rock, Robert Morris, and to their credit, a lot of these schools are up and coming now, and they're a lot better than they were in 2013 or 12 whenever I was visiting colleges. But I just fell into love with Waynesburg, and fortunate to have gone there.
So, well, you eliminated two questions. So let me throw you the next question. You get to Waynesburg. Was there ever a thought of trying to play baseball, or was it once you were there, you were into this broadcaster and sports broadcasting in specific mentality?
Sure. Yeah. So I played in high school. I played all 4 of my years. I was only on varsity for like a year and a half. I mean, I was fine. I wasn't incredible. I to this day, I would probably go back and say I probably should have played a little bit more. I was just a pitcher and a first baseman. But my senior year, when you have 2 guys who went on to play college baseball and in the pitching rotation, Zach Manupelli and David Cross, who actually went to Waynesburg, and then you've got future first round pick at first base and pitching a little bit in Alex Kirilloff. That doesn't really help my cause. So
that's a tough, it's a tough lineup to crack. Let's just
it is right. And so I thought I was all right. I mean, I couldn't hit my way out of a wet paper bag, but I could pitch a little bit. I got I think 8 or 9 innings as a senior, but I enjoyed the ride. I enjoyed playing. So I did actually intend on playing in Waynesburg. And I played baseball for my fall semester, though I'll admit, and even going back to those days, I'm sure the coaching staff would admit too, I wasn't around all the time because I was either doing a high school football game, or I would ask off to prep for a high school game, or to do whatever else was going on in the department, because I knew that I wanted to hit the ground running and get my feet wet very early at Waynesburg, having been through the sports announcing camp. And I don't know if we'll get into that at all, but having been through that, that was something that I knew I needed to do when I got there. So it wasn't acceptable for me for day 1, week 1, week 2, 3, 4 of the semester to constantly be in the weight room for baseball, or to be conditioning and then go into baseball practice. Fortunately, I guess it's kind of actually a funny story. So the coach didn't know my name, the pitching coach. He kept mixing me up. He called me a different name. So I guess when him and Mike Humiston, who was our head coach at the time, had their little talk in the meeting, they're like, well, this Dave or whatever he called me doesn't respond to me. He's like disrespectful. And the other coach just goes, well, yeah, that's because you're calling him the wrong name. So no kidding that he's not going to respond to you. But I ended up getting cut, which I wasn't too surprised by, and I wasn't too upset by, frankly, because at that point I'm 8-9 weeks into the semester, and I'm like, doesn't really matter. I can call the baseball games, I can stat the baseball games, I can do everything else. I can still be a room with baseball players all 4 years. And some of my best friends from Waynesburg are baseball guys. So it wasn't really a big deal to me. I probably would have quit anyway before the spring started. So I ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise, and allowed me to really, really dig into the Department of Communication.
Well, now tell me about this. I want to get your perspective on this sports announcing camp, because the products that have come out of it, I've had just a sample of what's come out of that program. What is it about the camp that brings you guys all in hitting the ground running when you do come to campus day 1?
I think there's a lot that goes into it. I know, and a lot of the other, if people are listening to this and want to go back and get other perspective, all those guys, Sam, Donnie, whoever else, I mean, all the guys you've had on, Ed and Jack, have done a great job in explaining it. I think that what stood out for me was putting me on a mic basically the minute we got there. I mean, I'm a junior in high school going into my senior year, and I had done a year of play-by-play with the basketball and football team at Plum. Dabbled a little bit into a hockey game, I think, so I kind of knew what I was doing to some degree, but at the same time, you get to that camp and it's like, oh damn, like I don't know what I'm doing at all. Mm-hmm. And I end up getting a lot of feedback, getting a lot of tips. I mean, you could ask Barat. We literally took the play-by-play like examples and rules sheet, and I would read it. to everyone else on the crew my senior year. Every single broadcaster went out, we'd go over it. So I definitely learned a lot. I think that's step one. And that transitioned me into a hell of a year as a senior at Plum in terms of doing the play-by-play and doing some morning announcements. I produced a telethon. So I had a little bit more of a background as to what was going on before I even got to Waynesburg. But the camp, I think, putting you on a microphone, giving you that real world experience of doing things and giving you feedback from obviously a guy in Lanny, and not just Lanny, because I think Bill Hillgrove spoke at that. And I forget who the other, it might have been Staggerwald and somebody else that spoke at it, but you hear those guys, you hear their perspective, you see and get to experience what the college program is like. And falling in love with at the time was what was an SD department and was until a couple of years ago. I mean, that's pretty impressive. They got to show you something to make you fall in love with that. So I think it was just a lot of, I never been, and the other thing was I had never been in a place where everybody around me was just as big a sports fan as I was. And you could talk about sports and we talked about sports until 1 or 2 in the morning and, have no problem with it, never got tired of it. And a lot of different perspective. I met a lot of good friends there, and it turned into a pipeline too, like all these other guys have said. A lot of my class as a senior in the class of 2017 at Waynesburg was at that sports announcing camp or at a sports announcing camp on their way into Waynesburg. So I just think the experience they give you, the knowledge that they give you, and what we were able to learn from that to jump into our college decision and to eventually get to Waynesburg and apply that stuff was really helpful.
And then once you're on campus, what is it about the department that keeps you guys close? I mean, we always talk about Lanny, but the department seems to have different layers to it. I mean, Lanny covers the sports broadcasting side, but you guys all seem to have the comm law side down, the other sides that come with the communications major. What is it about the department at Waynesburg that makes that I guess provides you guys the opportunity to succeed?
Well, I think first and foremost, the other guys have said it is getting you on the air. I mean, week one. I mean, as a freshman, I had a radio show for an hour, something that I had never even, dreamt about doing before. I had a radio show week 1 or week 2 after training. So that's obviously a big part of it. And the amount of reps you get at Waynesburg as opposed to somewhere else. And it's not like a Syracuse. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it. I've had second thoughts about the decision to go to Waynesburg when it comes to the professional job field. But when you're in college, there's no denying that you're on the air more and a lot earlier than you are at these other schools. If I went to Syracuse, I wouldn't have been on the air, AER or whatever, until my junior year at the very minimum. When you go to Waynesburg, I'm calling a football game, the Division III, granted, but a college football game 4 or 5 weeks into the semester. And granted, it was part of a class and we have to go, but you're getting the reps. So the reps were the biggest thing. And I think when you advance as a freshman and then into your sophomore, junior, senior years in the department, as you take on more responsibility, as you take on more of a leadership role, and frankly, as you kind of separate yourself, it sounds bad, but as you separate yourself, as you're the higher echelon, if you will, of what we have in the department talent wise, then you're going to get on the air a little bit more if you're better and doing harder work than some of the other guys. That's no disrespect to anybody else, but I think in the early years of the Waynesburg department, I think they do it. Lanny especially does a really good job with this, and Bill Molson, who I know a couple guys have mentioned, did a really good job with this. Is kind of not weeding people out, but they would put you to work. And if you didn't enjoy the work and you didn't do it well, then you found out pretty quickly that this isn't for me. So, I mean, we had some guys drop out here and there and go to different majors. And I think that helps make the group a little bit more tight knit too, because, it's the ride or dies, and the guys that are going throughout the entire program with you are always there with you, and you're hanging out with them all the time and working long hours with them. But I think from an overall perspective, the curriculum that they have is pretty damn good. I mean, I don't have many instances where I need to talk about communication law, but I had a class in comm law. And frankly, as a liberal arts school, I don't think any of us, maybe there are a few of us that really paid attention to courses outside of communication. And no disrespect to those professors or what those classes and curriculums were, but frankly, I didn't care about my biblical ministries class. I didn't care about my biology class. I didn't even take biology, but the grand picture is I didn't care about that stuff. I said, I need to pass it. That's all. If I can get by and pass it, then I need to focus on my comm classes, be those design classes, photography classes, video classes, or broadcasting classes, and everything in between that the department had to offer from a curriculum standpoint. I think was very helpful in giving everyone, not only me, but everyone, a more well-rounded communication education than it was just learning how to broadcast. Plus, at a small school like that, the reality is that the opportunity is going to be greater from an extracurriculars perspective. So I did a lot of work with Bobby Fox, our sports information director, from sophomore on to senior year, to the point where he's letting me go do baseball or go do softball, or I didn't do much basketball, football stuff because I was doing the Waynesburg University Sports Network stuff. But from a sports information side, going and doing that stuff on my own, going to Florida 3 times to broadcast the games for baseball and do the stats while I'm down there. And something that that was obviously helpful to have the opportunity to do in my position now and in the work that I've had since college. And that goes around the entire department. I was the radio general manager for a year. I was a sports director for the radio station. I did music directing. I was an assistant sports editor for the Yellow Jacket, our newspaper, for a couple of years, and on that staff for 4 years. Basically, the more you get your feet wet, and I don't know that I would have had the opportunity to do that at a lot of other schools other than Waynesburg, but the opportunity to get your feet wet, move up, and continue to learn and continue to lead, I think was really helpful in getting me prepared for the real world at Waynesburg.
Is there a specific broadcast at Waynesburg that stands out to you that you remember, like you can see it in your brain right now?
I mean, there's probably not a baseball one, oddly enough. The fact that I've done probably close to 400 professional games of baseball now, there's probably not a baseball one that really stands out. From a producing standpoint, I know when you asked this question to a couple other the guys, the first one that popped to my head was Waynesburg beating Washington and Jefferson on the football field. And I think 2015 would have been the fall of 2014, whatever it was. I was producing that game, and that was my first season producing. I had run our high home camera my entire freshman year through football and basketball, and that's not something freshmen did a lot. But I had come in with the experience of I've run it for our sports at Plum. I've done games at Plum, so I know what I'm doing. And they, fortunately, after a game of doing spotting and stat work, they threw me on there and was on there and that led to Bill Molson and a couple other people being okay with me being the producer. I kind of got groomed to produce and direct as a sophomore and to take over for 3 years because there wasn't really somebody that we handpicked or somebody that really stood out. Not that I stood out incredibly well against any juniors or seniors that year. But when I got to my sophomore year, that was my first year producing. I remember the game went to overtime. We blocked a kick in the first part of the overtime when W&J had the ball. And then our kicker, he was a fine kicker. He wasn't anything that was incredibly great. He kicks the field goal to win. And I can just tell the whole time guys, this is exciting, but we got a story to tell here. And I remember sitting on the bench doing that. There's another one at W&J. I think it was my junior year where Bill accidentally kicked out our power in the truck. And that we're in the middle of the game and the truck power goes down. I have never got up faster and ran out of a truck or ran anywhere faster than I did in that moment. So that moment always sticks out because people always make fun of how I got out of the truck when the power went out. So that one sticks out. From an actual play-by-play perspective, I think the biggest one for me was the PAC title game for basketball I think it was our sophomore year. The team went and played at St. Vincent. My broadcast partner, who I had, Andy Stanko, for 4 years, Waynesburg, him and I went and did that game. I had not done any playoff basketball until then because we had home games the entire way. So I was in the truck the whole time. I had never really done the pregame and halftime because I was in the truck producing or directing the show. So doing that one on radio was really special. And we lost the game. But I remember every bit of that game. I can remember some of the calls that are still on my basketball demo tape to this day from that game. Byram Luco had you obviously don't know who that is, but Byram Luco, for any of the Waynesburg people who may be listening, would know the name. I think he had like 25 points in that game, and this is a guy that was averaging like 4 points a game. We had some other big moments in that game. I mean, I remember that game like it was yesterday. And we got a call Andy and I, we went to Dino's in Greensburg after the game. And that became a tradition. Every time Waynesburg went to St. Vincent to play in a sport, we went to Dino's after the game. This was the first time. So Lanny calls me when we get to the restaurant. So Andy and I step out, and he just spoke wonders of the job we did. And I thought we did a pretty good job in the moment. Looking back on it, it's probably not our finest work as a team, but I thought we did a pretty good job for being sophomores in a huge moment. And getting a call from him, knowing that, and he doesn't have to listen to this as a professor. I mean, he listened to it live. And that was something that I thought was really cool, and something that has always stuck out to me, and what really solidified. And again, I've probably had a little bit of second thought since then, but what has really solidified, I picked the right place. And to get that call from a professor, from a mentor, from somebody who, you idolize growing up as a guy who wants to go into sports broadcasting, that did it for so long with the Pirates at the highest level, and frankly should be in the Hall of Fame, to have that call come in, that was something really special. I mean, there's games the rest of the way, my junior, senior year, that were really good games, really good moments. Never had an 1,000-point score call that Andy actually had, that we had a guy get to 1,000 when we were at Bethany. I forget, I think it was Jacob Flegel, I think, got to 1,000 at Bethany, or it was Jason Probst, one or the other, but he gets to 1,000. Andy had the play-by-play call, so I didn't get that. I mean, there's moments, there's things that are along the way, the rest of the way, that definitely stick out, but I think those are, from a producing standpoint and a broadcasting standpoint, probably the ones that I would pick out first.
Well, now let's jump into, and we're going to come back to that second guessing after this this portion of the show. But so you hit the ground running with your work at Waynesburg. You hit the ground running working high school games for, at the time, MSA, now TribLive. How does the WildThings come into play?
So they came into play. I was actually trying to think of what year I would have been in the 2015 season. I forget if it was Bobby Fox, our SID at Waynesburg, who mentioned something, or if it was somebody else and made a call that I had known. I think it was Bobby. But we got a call in 2015 from the lady's name was Deb Hilton, that worked at the WildThings, and I think she did community relations and some of the press box stuff, media relations. She did all the press releases and stuff, which is what I do now, at least part of my job. She was looking for scoreboard operators and official scores. So Bobby, knowing that I had done it, and I had met Sean King, who was he's now at Allegheny, I believe, but he was at Washington and Jefferson as the SID. He was with the WildThings. So I had met him in baseball games in the past, and it might have been him too that pointed me toward Deb, but I ended up doing scoring for the PA Rebellion, which was the national pro fast pitch team that was playing in Washington, and the WildThings did the scoring, did some scoreboard operation in 2015. So that was my first time experiencing what was WildThings baseball, and at the time Rebellion softball, which is, I'd like to forget about at times, but that was a good time, and I think that gave me a foot in the door, at least, because they knew who I was. Deb ended up leaving like a month into the year. I don't remember if she got let go, or if she left for another job, or I don't even remember who took over for. I think it was his name was Ben Eminger. I think he was an intern at the time, but he took over. That had the foot in the door. In 2016, I interned at the WildThings. I was supposed to intern with Randy Gore, who is WJPA and does the PAC Sports Network. Was supposed to intern with him. He had been the primary voice of the team when the team had WJPA, and is the rights holder for the radio station. So they were in. Randy had done the games from 02 to 15. He had won a couple of Broadcaster of the Year awards. Obviously, did a great job. So when they lost the WJPA deal, he was going to broadcast the games in 2016 through the PAC Sports Network gear. And I had met with him, was going to jump on with him and be the broadcast intern with him. That deal fell through with the WildThings. I still don't really know the entire story, which you think 7 years later, I would probably know a lot of what happened. But I do know a little bit of what happened, and to save face, it's not really even worth the discussion. But so that fell through. But then a week or two later, I saw internships advertised on the WildThings, and I called the office and I said, "Is there anything you still have because I would like to come back there. I think my internship experience would be a benefit to go back there. Granted, I'm working a YMCA day camp from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day during the summer, but I can come down after the game. If you need somebody, I'm your guy. So they had the opening for the MC Open. And one of my buddies from college, RJ Lacey, had done the MC work in 2015, and it was Nick Farrell, who works for WVU's, I think it's Blue and Gold Nation now. He does that, and he had been the MC in 2014. So again, a Waynesburg pipeline, getting into the MC position in 2016. I did that for the entire summer. Did a little bit more in the press box and kind of learning some things throughout the course of that year with Yancey Yeater, who was in the creative position at that point. Yancey left after 2016. They brought on a social media intern to do the social and the community relations, the in-game type stuff, which I had done for the entire 2016 season. So that's actually how it ended up falling into my hands. She was let go a couple weeks into the 2017 season, and Steve Zavacki, our executive director, called me the next day, and I kind of expected it because the lady who she went to Waynesburg, wasn't super good friends with her, but she had called me when she got let go that night and said, listen, they might call you because I know that they know your name, and they know that you were interested in doing something down there. So they called me the next day, and I went down, had to back out of YMCA day camp for the summer, had to tell the Trib, at the time it was still MSA, I had to tell Don Rebel, like, hey, I'm going into a full-time position, so I don't know how much I'm going to be available for the next couple of weeks. Fortunately, the WildThings were really nice about it. I took that first day off. I went and did a doubleheader at Cal U for softball for the MSA Sports Network, and then the next day I was at the WildThings full time, and that kept its way all the way through now, other than the 2019 season, which I worked as a seasonal employee, but I was still super involved in everything that was going on. But it's been it's been quite the ride at the WildThings on a small scale. From what I've been doing since 2015 to what I'm currently doing with the team. So, but it's been fun. And it's been a journey that I love to talk about with anybody that asks.
Well, and you brought up Randy's a couple broadcaster of the year awards. You have notched 2 of those yourself, sir. What goes into your pregame routine when you're calling a game?
A lot goes into it. And those 2 awards are more of a reflection at times of the work that I'm doing before the game and after the game, and kind of being around players, being around coaching staffs, managers, and general managers as a traveling part of the team. A lot of that is a reflection of the work that I was doing in those, and I'll talk about that. But from a pregame perspective, it's tough now because I'm doing more things now than I was when I took over in the booth in 2018. So in 18, I was doing social media. I had a hand in game, but I had a really good group of interns that we trained well, and those guys could handle it. Those girls and guys could handle it during the game, so I could focus on what was going on upstairs. I had a great group of media interns that was with me in that 2018 season that kind of kept me sane over the course of 80-hour work weeks, and coming back from the road and getting back at 7 or 8 a.m. and back in the office at 9 a.m. My game notes from a pregame standpoint, my game notes packet is like 24 pages long. Not all of those get updated on a daily basis, but a good bit of them get updated on a daily basis. I'm probably working on those on a good day for 3.5 hours before a game. So that's part of it. I'd like to, and I haven't really had time because of what else I'm doing, but I don't prep the other team as well as I would like to. I know a lot about the other team because I talk to other broadcasters, and I see the box scores every night. I watch highlights. I watch other games. I mean, I like to joke with the other guys in the league. I'm a junkie. I mean, I will go back and I will watch Gateway play Schaumburg after our game ends, and I'll turn the other game on and watch. So I know a little bit about what's going on, and I'm looking at stats every day. So I know who's playing well. I know what teams are playing well. So that does get me out of that mess a little bit. But from a pregame routine perspective, it's a lot. And there's a lot of game notes to be done. There's a lot of other work to be done that is outside of the broadcast, and not all of the broadcasters in the league are like that. Most of them just to go in, get their game notes done. And some of them don't even do game notes. They just prep for the game and do it. That's not what I'm able to do. I'm at the office at 9 a.m. doing the game notes, doing the stat packs for the managers and the coaches, having a hand in the in-game stuff that's going on, still having a hand in all the creative stuff that's going on from the video boards perspective, the music, the PA announcer, whatever. I've got all that responsibility. Oh, and then put on a headset at 6:45 and do the game. So I've been fortunate to have three or four really, really good broadcast interns that have been in the booth with me. So those guys help me when I'm at home. And I've always said I love the road way more than being at home because it's a chance to just do the broadcasting stuff and the social and the media relations stuff. The pregame routine's challenging, and it's not always something that I envy. Even myself, I don't really like it sometimes, but I think that a lot of the work into those awards went from that and what I was doing pregame. I mean, at 19 and 21, when I won the awards, I interviewed 4 or 5, 6 managers for a pregame show. No other broadcaster in the league does that. And I would do things that would seem like I'm kissing ass a little bit to try and get some votes for that award. But I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
You have to make friends on the other side. And I think I did that pretty well in 2019 and 21. And I thought I should have or could have at least won it again this year. Happy that Tim Calderwood from Schaumburg won it. He's probably my best friend amongst the broadcasters in the league. So wasn't upset at all that he won it. But I think selfishly a little bit, I would have liked to win the award again. I mean, we were the only one doing highlights every night. We posted our game highlights. We posted our in-game highlights on Twitter, and I'm doing the highlights on Twitter live cut while I'm doing the game. So it's not like somebody else is posting the highlights and I'm just sitting there focusing on. We got a lot of things going on over the course of a game, but the pregame routine is crazy. To answer the question, it's long, it's challenging, it's frustrating at times, but I think I've got a pretty good routine down now that allows me to go on. And I'm a much different broadcaster than most of the other guys in baseball are, frankly. Not even just the Frontier League. I don't like to be more robotic like a lot of other people are. Syracuse teaches you, or I think a lot of people from Syracuse or Arizona State or Northwestern or some of those other huge schools tend to sound a little bit robotic. I don't like that. That's not my style. I'm a little bit more free spirited. I analyze a lot more. I talk a lot about the bigger things and what's going on in the sport and what's going on in the game and try to focus on more player centric stuff than being robotic. But I think that style blends with a kind of a robotic style that leads to a good broadcast. And I've had countless people come up and say how much they enjoy listening to me because I'm different than they do it listening to some of the other guys in the league. They all do a pretty good job, and some of them do a great job. But I think there's a different feel to my broadcast than there is to a lot of the other broadcasts, not only in the Frontier League, but MILB guys that I have listened to or Major League guys that I have listened to. Like I said, I'm a junkie, so I listen to everybody and I see what's going on. So, but I mean, that's certainly part of the pregame routine as well, is trying to be a little bit different and do things a little bit differently than a lot of other people do it.
So this season specifically, there was a lot of excitement there in Washington County.
There was.
What was different about this team than teams in the past?
Well, I don't think this team was as good as the 2018 team, oddly enough. And I've said that to their faces. So if they listen to this and get upset with me, they already know that I've said it. I think there was something special about this team, though. They were from day one, I think, a lot closer than all of our other teams. And they went through a lot of roster moves and transactions throughout the first few weeks of the season as we tried to blend right. I mean, we came close to trading an all-star outfielder at the deadline for another all-star outfielder. We ended up getting the all-star outfielder, Anthony Brocato from Florence, for a player to be named. So for a future, we also released an all-star catcher in the middle of the season. I mean, the guy was Alex Alvarez, was hitting like 200. So it wasn't like he was incredible, and the catching in the west side of the league wasn't great. So he was an all-star for that reason, but we released an all-star and the team never really took it against themselves. They took it in stride and kept going. And that was a team, unlike last year, our team in 21, was a first place team, a team that went to a championship series, a team that was a win away again for the fourth straight time in a championship series for the Wild Things. That was a win away from winning a championship and came up short. But that team was much different than the 22 team, and that the 21 team, we were behind most of the year. I mean, we were 4, 5, 6, 7 games back a month in. We had a terrible start. Ended up going, I don't even remember what the record was, like 30-9 or something like that over the next 40 games. We got ourselves within striking distance. They kept playing well, and then we ended up taking over first place like a week before the season ended in 21. So that was a year that only the division champion in the Frontier League and the 4 divisions made the playoffs. So because of COVID, because of travel, that made things a lot more special, I think, in that run, because every night we're fighting back and we're watching the scoreboard to see what Sussex County at the time was doing. And we go to Sussex County, and we had the 4-game series circled on our calendar the entire year. At the beginning, we said, if we're going to come back, we've got to go. That's the series where we have a chance to come back and take over. And we end up sweeping that 4-game series in first place. We clinch a couple nights later in New Jersey before we even play the game that night. The clinching moments are always great, but this team was different this year in 22, where we started 2-4. But then we were nuts the rest of the way. I mean, we were in first place for the better part of the last 65 games of the season. And that's not something that happens in the Frontier League. That's not something that, if you're not the Los Angeles Dodgers, that's not something that happens in Major League Baseball, where you're in first place for that extended period in terms of a percentage of the season of the time. So this team was a lot different in that regard. I think they were a lot closer. I think the talent level that we had come in was another year where we had some guys midseason last year that came in and sparked us. We had a kid this year, Kobe Foster, a left-handed pitcher that came in and is an NAIA guy who was 25-1 in his last 2 seasons in NAIA. You don't know what he's going to give you when you get to the Pro Bowl game, but he ends up winning Rookie of the Year in the Frontier League. So he was nuts. A lot of the guys that came in midseason really helped us out and stabilized things and holes that we had that we knew we had the entire year, but we were able to fill some of those holes. And then, of course, you get to playoff baseball. It's a crapshoot, and we lose in 2 games to a team that we can't get the monkey off our back with the Schaumburg Boomers right now. There was problems last year in the regular season, problems that bled into the championship series. There was a benches clearing incident the first time we played them this year. One of our guys threw 2 punches. Like, we don't like each other. And so to lose to that team in the first round of the playoffs in a best of 3 as a division champion, as a 62-win team, that's the second most wins in Wild Things history. To lose to that team really, really hurt. But I think that's what made the season even more special, as we've had about a month here to look back on it and to kind of relax a little bit. That's what made it even more special, was the fact that we were so damn good during the regular season that there really wasn't a moment where we were second guessing if we were going to win a division title. It was a matter of when. And then we were trying, obviously, to win a championship. Not in the cards this year. Hopefully it's in the cards in 23 or soon, because I can't do much more of this losing in the playoffs thing. It's not fun. But yeah, this team was really special. There was a lot of talent on this team. I don't know how many of them will be back, but there was a lot of talent on this 2022 team that I think Wild Things fans and listen, there aren't a lot of, we know the reality is that there's not a lot of fans that would know who our second pitcher in our rotation was if we asked them today. But the fans that are there for the diehard, the people that are there every day, and the interns and the staff, they all get it, and they all get what we went through to get to that point. And I think we're pretty proud of where we got to. Just a matter of trying to get over that hump and look for what makes the next group special enough.
Well, so you kind of you led me into my next question. Will the team look similar to this 2022 roster? Is it too early to know?
I hope so. It's probably a little bit too early to tell. Our manager will be in his 3rd year, so I know he's a little bit I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. He is very emotional still, I think, about what happened in the playoffs. So he's mentioned a couple names, and I won't go into specifics of fear of one of them listening, for him listening. The couple guys that have maybe they've run their course with the Wild Things that myself or Tony Busili, our general manager, or maybe even him deep down disagrees with, guys that we want back, that we know for sure that are big pieces of a championship roster that we're trying to build. So, I mean, I hope it looks similar. I think I would run it back if it was me and we had the opportunity to bring everybody, which is not the reality. But if we had the opportunity to bring everybody back, at least from the offensive side of the coin, I would bring them all back. I would bring the entire starting lineup back if I could and run it back because the team was that good. I'm not going to base 2 games of not hitting the baseball and not pitching it incredibly well in the playoffs. Again, what we could do in 2023. From a pitching standpoint, I think we'll have a couple of the guys back. At least I hope we have. There's a Justin Showalter, one of our pitchers that we put on inactive at the end of the year. Hopefully he's back. Hopefully Kobe is back. If you can get in this league, if you can bring back some experienced guys that have been there and done that, and not necessarily experienced in terms of age and in terms of experience in pro ball, but if you can bring some R2s back, and by that I mean guys in their second year of being a rookie in baseball or in their second year of pro ball, you bring some of those guys back, you bring some of your core guys back, I think you can run it back again. But the reality of the Frontier League is that we don't pay very much. The American Association, the Atlantic League both pay more. Obviously, guys are trying to get an MILB still, and that's our grand goal is to get guys into there or get guys back there that have fallen out for whatever reason it may be. But I would hope that it looks the same. Again, I would bring back all 24 guys if I could. And that's not the reality. But I think if we could get back 10 or 12 of them, if we could get back 50% of those guys, I think you're in pretty good shape. And then you fill your holes where you need to and try to do this thing again.
So I'm going to pull a question from the Wild Things social media, the Twitter page. What is your Mount Rushmore of WildThings players?
My Mount Rushmore of WildThings players. You see,
for those diehards out there.
Yeah, so this could get me in trouble with some people. So that I know more about now because there wasn't very good record keeping from 2002 to about 2011 when Point Streak took over the league's stats platform. So once we got to 2011, everything's there and it's easier to go back on. But the task for me going into the 20th season in 2022 was to go back and I got to do the statistical leaderboards. I got to know top 10 and record holders for every single, at least the stats that I think matter. So going down from a pitcher's standpoint, innings pitched, games started, saves, wins, losses, ERA, whip, all that stuff that I think is important. That obviously we don't have any sabermetric type stuff like WAR or anything like that in the Frontier League, but that's what I spent 2 months doing in the off season. And so I know a lot more about WildThings past than a lot of the people even working there that have been there the entire time know. They just know that names that have come around and guys that they think have been really good. So if I can only pick 4, it's tough because it's I think Chris Sidak is the first name I have to go to because he's the only retired number in franchise history, Frontier League Hall of Famer. Until this year, he held most of the offensive records in terms of a career in the Frontier League. Cannon Matt kid from locally. So Chris is definitely on there. I think Zach Strecker would be on there for me. He's our saves leader in the Frontier League's all-time saves king. He was here from 2017 through 21. And you don't get to see the longevity in our league very often either. So those are the first 2 guys that I would put on there. And I think the other 2 are really complicated because we can sit here and we can say, well, I can look for longevity and I can look for guys who had been there 2, 3, 4, 5 years at the beginning. But I can also say this guy was an MVP in 1 season with the WildThings. And that's enough in the Frontier League to put you on an all-decade team for a team if you play 1 really, really good season. So I think Sidak, Strecker, I would probably put Jared Houghton on there. He was a left-handed pitcher from 02 to 03 that is in the Frontier League Hall of Fame now. Nasty, crafty, whatever word you wanted to use for him. I don't think 4 is fair either. I'm going to end up splitting hairs on the 3rd and 4th one. But if I had to put out 3 and 4, I would probably say Houghton. And then I would probably want to get somebody from the newer age. Probably, though he's not the best all-around player that we've had, I think, in terms of impact on the organization, in terms of records that he holds from an offensive standpoint, I think Hector Roa has to be your guy. And I know that a lot of WildThings fans, maybe they've watched for 20 years and disagree, but And I know that our manager at times and our coaching staff doesn't necessarily like all that he does, and he's not the same player he was now, or he was in 2017 than he is now. But in terms of impact on the organization, in terms of impact on the fan base, and in terms of what he's done on the field, I think he deserves a spot. I don't think he's a top 4 player statistically, or a top 4 player in terms of baseball talent that has come through the Wild Things organization, but I think he's a name that we would have to consider putting them on there. I mean, he does lessons at Seaside, which is run by Chris Sidak in Washington here. He's all around the community, and this is a guy that is basically,
it's more than baseball to him.
He's thrown himself into the Wild Things culture, and he's thrown himself into the organization, into what we do, and into what we do in the community. And I think that there's something to be said for that at our level of baseball. A guy who maybe does want to go back into MILB. He's been with the Astros organization, but a guy that also says, you know what, if you try to trade me, I'm just going to retire. Because I would rather play in Washington, and I'm not playing anywhere else. So I think there's something to be said for that. Like I said, he's probably not a Mount Rushmore in terms of baseball talent, in terms of best statistically, but I guess the 4 that I'm going to go with are Strecker, Sidak, Roa, and Houghton. But there's probably enough room. If we could have 3 Mount Rushmores and 12 guys on there, I think we could probably put together a pretty damn good team. But I'll go with those 4.
Well, Kyle, we've come to that time of the show. I want to say thank you once again. For those of you that are just joining us, this is Kyle Dawson, the Assistant General Manager of Player Operations and play-by-play announcer for the Washington WildThings. Go back to the beginning, watch the rest of the show. You don't want to watch just the last 3 minutes of me telling you where you can find everything. But if you are looking to find us, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Prime, iHeartRadio, and the Wish app. You can also find us on YouTube, on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. The only one that you have to change what you type in is the Instagram. It's Dingo_talk as opposed to just DingoTalk. We're here every Thursday at 10 o'clock. I am Carlo Guadagnino, Kyle Dawson. Thank you again for joining us, and we will catch you guys next week, Chuckleheads. You want to know by now. You want to know by now.